for the year. We hoping it's going to be invaluable from the topics that we have selected. We just want to bring and go through a few formalities, and just to let you know that this meeting will be recorded, and by participating, you're giving consent to the recording thereof. Just to let you know, I am Fundi Zulu. I am part of the Market Access Committee. We have also added a few disclaimers into these recordings of the sessions. Read AI will not be permitted and will be disabled during the SAMED meetings and forums. It is just to maintain the privacy and confidentiality of all participants. The information shared in these meetings is intended solely for SAMED members, and third-party content may include proprietary information. Any use or distribution of this information outside of the meeting's explicitly permitted scope requires prior authorization. This measure is in place to protect sensitive information and to respect the rights of all contributors. With regards to the competition law, we'd like to bring a reminder and look at conflicts of interest. The meeting is held with no intent to collude or engage in any matter that might contravene competition law. Conflicts of interest must be declared, and if required, members must recuse themselves either before or during the meeting as and when it becomes apparent. Just as a disclaimer, the content in relation to presentations, views, opinions, advice expressed within the context of this event by invited speakers are theirs and not those of SAMED. And as such, it does not imply any endorsement by SAMED, either the content or the speaker. The content is not a substitute for appropriate legal advice and is not binding on SAMED. SAMED, its board members, committees, employees, and members will not be responsible for any inaccuracies or omissions or liable for any damages or loss of whatsoever nature suffered by any persons as a result of relying or using the content provided. With the session that we are about to embark on, we've got speakers that we do have lined up. But just before we go into that, we have on our screens the do's and don'ts that act as a guide in terms of competition law that we are all about by. So it's just to take note of those. So with our first speaker and our topics for today, we would look at Inside Life Healthcare's procurement process, and we will be addressing the key challenges and priorities. We will also have the MedTech procurement and HTA update, looking at it from a perspective of the NHI landscape. We will look at also Inside Actuaries in independent review, looking at advancing HTA and value-based initiatives. We will also have, last but not least, an overview of the health quality assurance's role and progress in the medtech industry. So as our first speaker, we have Hendrik van Rooyen, and I'd just like to give a brief overview of Hendrik. And before I start, Hendrik, thank you for taking the time to join us. Hendrik comes from the Life Healthcare Group. He is a qualified pharmacist from the University of KwaZulu-Natal and also has completed a postgraduate management certificate from Gordon Institute of Business Science. He has been with Life Healthcare for 16 years, 14 of those in the procurement space. For the last 4.5 years, Hendrik has been holding the position of Procurement Manager, Services and Commodities, where he and his team of supply managers are responsible for sourcing, contract management, as well as vendor compliance and vendor relationship management across the entire spectrum of product services that Life Healthcare procures. Hendrik will give us an insight into the Life Healthcare's procurement process and address key challenges and priorities. Hendrik, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you and thank you for your time. I think you can put up your slides and you can have the control to your slides. Just as before you start, Hendrik, If our colleagues have questions, please do post them on the chat group, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Right, good morning, everybody. Just a thumbs up if you can see me, Fundi. Thank you. Yeah, you can hear me. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. I've kind of squizzed through the names on the people on this call and many familiar names that I'm seeing. So, yeah, nice to have a virtual kind of discussion with all of you. Right. So, I think what we want to focus on today is really looking at some of the key processes that we look at within this sourcing component of life healthcare, or department within life healthcare at least. Some of the processes that may have been tweaked now recently a little bit, and also ones that we think needs a little bit of further looking into or further adjustment. But certainly very important processes for us, and I think for you as vendors as well. So I'd like to address some of the key challenges there, and maybe look at some of the not key strategic things necessarily in 2025, but from a procurement point of view, the things that we will definitely be driving within 2025. So we're going to start by looking at our supplier representative protocol. There's been some updates to that recently, and you would have received communication from Tolofello's desk around that. You would also see the update appearing in the tenders that we will send out throughout the course of the year. We'll be speaking a little bit about the new product or service application process. And both of these, I know we have spent some time in previous vendor days and discussions and meetings and communications that we've sent, but I think important forum to raise it nonetheless, just so that we are all on the same page. We often get many questions around this process, and then looking towards 2025. So I think at the onset, it's very important to note and to mention that we sometimes get the comments that we're only looking at cost and driving cost. Of course, cost is one of the important components when we look at procuring, especially in the current economic climate that we find ourselves and the pressure that we are facing within healthcare in South African context. But it's very important to remember is that we will never, ever sacrifice quality for the sake of cost. That has always been the mission statement of the company, but also of this department specifically. Our aim really is to deliver high quality care, but that is also cost effective. And of course, it goes without saying that doing this should be centered around legal compliance, other governance compliance as well, while taking into consideration sustainability as well as social economic transformation that forms part of our processes. And those of you that have participated in our tenders in the past and entered into discussion with us would know that this is key to Life Healthcare's kind of ethos, and what drives our conversations. We've had many conversations around this in the past, and so this remain key areas for Life Healthcare to focus on going forward. And I think it's important to keep this in mind, irrespective of what procurement specific process that we speak about, because at the very basis of it, all of these kind of topics are key to that conversation. So if we start by looking at the supplier representative policy, there was an update shared in October, just last month, and I'm sure most of you would have received it. If not, I'm quite happy that you just pop me a mail and we'll share that with you as well. But just looking at that, there were a couple of updates we needed to make. And so needless to say, that documentation, as any documentation that we send out, is confidential and proprietary. Is not meant to be shared with other vendors or even our own competitors in the market. It purely is meant for the purpose of what it was intended for. But the REP protocol actually applies to all life healthcare facilities, whether it's a rehab facility or acute, whatever it may be. Representatives are allowed into facilities by invitation and by appointment only. Permission is obtained from the relative function within the hospital. So if we're speaking about medical equipment, specifically, that will be the clinical engineer, And from a medicine or surgical consumable perspective, that would be the pharmacy manager. This is nothing new. I think all of you know that. But these guys really are the gatekeepers within the facilities. And I do understand that in some cases, the pharmacy manager may delegate such responsibilities to, let's say, an inventory manager or a senior pharmacist. But needless to say, pharmacy is the port of call for those type of products. Our preference will always be given to our formally or our preferred vendors and those specific products, as part of our commitment also to the vendors when we contract in terms of meeting those contractual obligations. Non-formulary products may not be marketed within the facilities, and I think that's an important point to mention as well. I realize that sometimes you may have both formulary and non-formulary products that you would be marketed, but that is also part of the process that usually gets followed at a pharmacy level. If we use that as an example, where you'll be asked, like, what is the purpose of the visit, what products are being marketed, and that the formulary products are the ones indeed marketed. Okay. Generally, what happens, hospitals have different processes at an operational level, which we don't dictate here from center in terms of the type of access that is given, or at least the token thereof. So whether it's a sticker or a voucher that gives the representative access into the facilities, that's kind of determined at a hospital level, but there'll be some kind of access given. Demonstrations are to be held between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock within the facilities. And then this year, and I'm sure most of you guys, the SAMED members, would be happy about this, but I don't think anything new to the market at large, is that we started implementing the Crisis digital access card. So previously, we'd remember that we've just required registration. Now we actually have gone the next step where we go the scanning of the QR codes and getting the relative access to the different wards, depending on the site within the hospital that you intend visiting. So I've kind of mentioned this before, but pharma reps report to pharmacy for access. And if it's outside of the operating hours then of the pharmacy, then you report to the main reception or the accident emergency unit, or trauma, as some people call it. Where the process is not being followed, and I need to say this as well, and luckily for us, it's been few. Generally, the process is being followed, but if we find that it's not being followed, you probably will have to have a conversation with the pharmacy manager. They'll probably call you in to have a discussion. And we really ask that that process is followed and that the access kind of discussions at a hospital and principles are followed and stuck to, because there's very often very good reasons why the hospitals are asking for certain things at certain times or not. And so if that procedure is not followed, the pharmacy manager will call you in, or the rep in, for a meeting to kind of discuss, no, you're not following the rules, this is what you need to do within the hospital or whatnot. But please, if we can ask every person to stick to that, because if it gets to that stage, we wouldn't want to revoke access from a vendor's perspective specifically to that hospital, and then we'll go one vendor to all. We won't go on that specific product. So we don't really want to get into that, but we'd appreciate cooperation with that. Generally, it's been good, as I've said. The other very important bit that has come in into the change is that no rep may amend or instruct a life healthcare staff member to amend the consignment or loan stock billing sheets. In other words, telling them add this or take that off or don't do that. Billing should only be performed by the life healthcare staff by using the consignment book. And then, of course, that's signed off by the scrub nurse that was present in theatre. They can verify that information so that we don't have discrepancies between what has been billed and what has actually been used within theatre. Medical equipment that needs to be demonstrated or placed within a facility needs the approval from the clinical engineer. And then, as you know, there's an appropriate agreement that needs to be signed, whether that's a rental agreement or a placement agreement, that will have to be discussed with the clinical engineer on site. Product evaluations are authorized by procurement only, so that will have to come through us, and you're welcome to send it to me or one of the supply managers for us to look at before it goes into the hospitals for that. And important, especially this time of the year, no gifts, no vouchers, or any of that sort to any of the life healthcare staff members. We are quite strict about that as well. From a survey perspective, this is something else that we actually get quite often. Especially, I know when you guys do your ISO accreditations, then you send out surveys to your customers. Now, we don't have an objection to that. The only thing that we ask is that you actually send them to me first for approval. And in fact, the approval process, it will go a little bit faster if you check for a couple of things. So make sure that it is concise. What we can't do is have our people spend 45 minutes answering a questionnaire. But the second thing as well is that we don't solicit any confidential information, whether from Life Healthcare or in comparison to your peers. So for instance, some of the surveys I have declined in the past is where questions are asked, like for instance, how do you compare the service offered from supplier A against supplier B, supplier C, supplier D, as an example. And so we actually don't want to get into that. It's not about comparing service. It's around really soliciting information, I would imagine, around your service levels and the service that you offer to your clients. Okay. You will also shortly, well, I'm saying shortly, probably within the next month to two, also received update communication when it comes to gifts and sponsorships, etc., from a procurement perspective, where we are also kind of tightening up on that a little bit more and what is expected from a Life Healthcare, from Life Healthcare as a company. So you can kind of look out for that comms in due course. Right, the contract management and compliance. So most of you would also know that where we contract for formulary items with you guys, we require a fill rate of 98%, and I will touch on this a little bit more in the subsequent slides. But really, this is important for us. One of the key things that we've noticed, especially within the pharma industry, and when I say pharma, I mean medicines and surgical consumables, medical devices, is that they are often out of stocks and frequent out of stocks. So you can imagine from a procurement department perspective, it affects not only our reputation for putting that product or that vendor on formulary to begin with, but it also affects our operational efficiency at a hospital level when they need to run around to find alternative products. I do know that the world has been a little bit upside down for the last couple of years, and there's been many things at an international level that's happened, even locally, that's affected the importation of many products. But I think this is something that we need to get better with, and the only way we're going to do that is we work together. So we've worked quite a lot with Surgicom, as an example, to get to a level where we have some reporting that we could offer as a solution in driving better fill rate compliance. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in the graph, as I said. But it's very important for us, and you'll see that mentioned in our contracts as well, from a compliance perspective and ongoing compliance, by the way. So if we have looked for specific certification or quality certifications as an example, is that level of compliance, even though assessed at the point of awarding the contract, needs to be maintained throughout. If sometimes we find that it lapses within the agreement and we find out upon inspection, actually is no longer valid. So it's important that all vendors kind of keep that certification up. Also that the quality of products are consistent with our specifications. So if we've contracted on something and we agree that that specific blue needle is what we're going to be using of that grade, that it remains blue, that it remains a needle, and it remains at that specific specification that we've agreed to up front. If there's any change to that, it needs to be communicated up front with the supply manager that has dealt with with that product category. Cost competitiveness, I mean, goes without saying as well. We've agreed to pricing, we've moved on, but I mean, throughout the contract process, I think it's also important that we make sure that we remain cost competitive in those product categories. We'll have meetings for reviewing our progress, and I mean that goes without saying, the supply managers, and there's some data that they can assist with in terms of giving more insight into that. And from a KPI perspective, take note that you'll see with the contracts that we signed, they probably became a little bit more lengthier or more wordy in the recent months or year or two, simply because we are building in more of those KPIs into our source to contract documents, so that firstly, the vendor knows upfront what is our requirements. Also, just to note that if the specifications of the tender cannot be met, it's preferred that you rather tell us that you can't meet those, or there may be something that you're worried about there upfront, rather than getting through the process at the point of contracting to find out that actually you can't meet those KPIs. Okay. Also important that the performance, and this is something we will get particularly more strict around, is the performance of each vendor will influence future awards and contracts. So important just to note that. Okay, from a kind of inside perspective, looking inwards, we have internal reporting mechanisms for hospitals to raise queries with us as well. So the one is having the relationship, and our procurement kind of sits in the middle of this relationship, as with most industries. We sit between the vendor and liaise with you guys, but also with the hospital. So the feedback mechanism within our hospitals, they are able to report on things like out of stocks, to us if we don't pick it up, or it happens before we've actually received communication from vendors. And by the way, that's also why we keep saying proactive communication is actually key. The sooner we know about something happening, the best the chances are for us to do something about it. And then, of course, product complaints, adverse drug reactions, they report this to us, as well as any sales or delivery issues that may happen. And we'll close those out with you as we have been doing. Just circling back to the fill rate, as I kind of alluded to earlier, many of the fill rate issues also could have been circumnavigated if the required 3 months worth of safety stock was kept, as per the contractual obligation. So that's something I want to point out as well, and this is exactly why we have that built into our contracts. Because if something happens that's maybe unforeseen, at least we have that 3 months worth of stock that we could kind of call back on. So I understand from time to time there may be an increase in utilization or a spike for whatever reason, but I think that's important, that that's again where we keep in communication with the supply manager to say there's been a massive spike for some reason in this month. Do you have any insights maybe that you could share? But it's important that we look at that. If we look at a graph from the fill rate specifically, you would know that we have set a target of 98% for our fill rate. And that's based on value. You can see also the progression through the last, for us, this is the financial year, for FY 2024. Our average fill rate was sitting around 90.7%. With September, we went up to 93.2%, which was the highest we've ever been. But I think also, not a massive increase if you look at October last year where we were. So I do understand that from time to time there may be hospitals ordering incorrect pack sizes or quantities that influence this. Absolutely, this is within the data, and we work with the hospitals to also get that being done better. But I think fill rate is definitely one of those things, if you have any contracts with us, that we are going to get a lot more stricter on, and you will see in subsequent months maybe some of the steps that we'll take in this. The first of which some of you may have received was where we will be grading vendors on various aspects of the services that we get, and we'll still kind of send communication what that looks like. Fill rate is one of them. So you'll receive kind of like a grading A+ or a B or what C grading based on this one KPI on fill rate. But likewise, there would be others that would come out and maybe around transformation or your service or etc. And that is something new that we'll be driving within this financial year, 2025. Within a life healthcare perspective, to see how we get kind of almost like an overall, I want to call it a dashboard, but there are different measuring criteria that we can kind of, or a lens at least, that we can view vendors and the service that you provide to us. So very, very important. As you know, this is driven by through Surgicom data, and so we always will implore the vendors to also liaise with Surgicom at the same time, so that you maybe have a more up-to-date view of what your fill rate looks like to Life Healthcare within the month, whether that's every week or maybe mid-month or something, so that we don't wait for the end of the month to get the data and then it's kind of reporting retrospectively. It's always better to be proactive as much as possible. The reasons that we've mainly found for this, the fill rate concerns from the hospitals, I've already mentioned some of the incorrect ordering quantities, and there we have been working with them. But from a vendor perspective, we've actually found now through the last year and a half, 2 years that we've been doing this, a couple of things that come up as repeated reasons for lower than the target fill rates. The one is not maintaining the adequate safety stock levels, the 3 months that we've spoken about. And also two, not maybe or you may have then allocate sufficient stock, but not at each DC, which is the other thing we found. From time to time, there are material masters that are not always updated with live healthcare, and this we see actually quite often in a couple of projects that we do. Sometimes we get communication that you will discontinue a list of 10 items, but you maybe do have stock. So you just kind of inform us that you're going to be doing this. We'll send communication to the hospitals, but then by the time it actually gets discontinued, we often don't get communication back to say, okay, well, now the stock is done. It's actually now discontinued. And also, more importantly, we have also discontinued it on MediCredit. Now, that's the other important thing. So, in fact, then we're none the wiser that these products are actually discontinued. And if a hospital were to purchase for whatever reason against that code, it will reflect on the report. So, very important to note, if there's any changes in pack sizes or nappy codes or whatever it may be, that we are at the product database is informed about that proactively, so we can kind of change that. And then real-time responses from Surgicom, for instance. Some vendors will, it'll send a message through Surgicom to the vendor for the order, but it's not immediately actioned, or it's not actioned in real time, and therefore it also affects the fulfillment values and quantities as part of that. Okay, so how are we going to drive improvement? Well, from contract refinement, and I've touched on that in this just now in the previous slide. You'll see that coming through in the contracts that we'll be signing, and then also importantly, is also enforcing those penalties, because I think even though we've had them in the past, we haven't necessarily enforced them strictly, but we are needing to get to that point now. Now, we will look at where certain stock levels are not being maintained, and we have these frequent out of stocks, revoking certain privileges from a vendor until we get that right. We have to get the basics right before we actually move on to further discussions on this side. And as I said before, your future contracting is also based on the performance in the contracts. Okay. This is just a very brief view. The only thing I wanted to say around this really is that contracting is a two-way street. And so although I am talking to you as a vendor around this and what the fill rates look like, we drive compliance with the hospitals. This is just one dashboard that we share with all hospitals on a monthly basis, and they have actually got access to it, so they run it themselves. And it can be done by hospital, region, category of products, etc., etc. And therefore you can see that there's a drive towards having the hospitals also comply with that. So I don't want you to think that we're only driving this with the vendors and not with the hospitals. But needless to say, you can imagine if we drive this aggressively, what would happen if we go, well, they're out of stock. Sorry, no. So your vendor that we should be buying from is out of stock. We can't buy, therefore we can't implement. So that is why compliance and the conversion together with the fill rate actually becomes one important conversation to have in unison. Okay, I'm going to go through this quite quickly. I think you all understand the new product application process, and I know Nomti is Fundi is going to share the slides at the end of the day, so we will share this, and you can read through it. But we have a new product application process that needs to be followed. It seems to be working quite well, and I'm hoping you're finding the same. And going through the mailbox. The only thing I wanted to mention is that we often find incomplete documentation. So please remember that if you do not kind of submit all the documents and the information required the first time, kind of the clock starts over again upon your second submission. And then you need to do a new submission with all documents in the same email again. Second thing on here is that we often get frequent follow-ups way before the 60-day period. So if we can just ask that doesn't happen, wait for the 60 days. And if you haven't received feedback, please escalate to me. I'll happily follow up for you. Okay. For the assessment on that, we look, when we get the new product application or the service application, we will look for any conflict with existing contracts. Obviously, we can't approve new things if it's in conflict with a contract we currently have. How competitive is the offering? Is the quality and the governance documentation criteria there backing that product or service being offered? Is there a business requirement? And then, of course, is there funder reimbursement? I understand that some cases won't be, just due to the nature of the product itself or the service being offered. But that is something we take into consideration. But the end result really is then getting approval or not to market within life healthcare facilities. But again, coming back to the point about business requirement, there's no obligation on the hospital to purchase these items. It is an opportunity for you to market it within the hospital if they're so inclined in. Then you can do that. There is an internal process for the hospitals to request new product codes. So the moment they want to use it, we don't load all codes on our system, only when there's a business request. But importantly is that there is a process to do that internally. So we will not take a instruction from a vendor to load a new code based on what a doctor in some hospital wants. We get this query quite frequently as well. So if a doctor has said that they want a specific product, best that you discuss that with the pharmacy manager at site level, and that they can follow the necessary internal processes. Right, for 2025, I think in a nutshell, what is going to be some of the main drivers for us? There's definitely pressure on commercial viability. I don't think it's specific only to the healthcare sector, definitely not only to life healthcare, but there will be an intense look at whatever submission it is that you do to us from a whether it's a price increase or a tender submission or a proposal, whatever it is, a POC. The look would be with the lens of cost, as always, the utilization. So are we using the correct thing at the correct time for the right purpose? Is there a wastage? Can there be wastage reduction? Important. And that is kind of a two-way approach. It's not only from a costing perspective. Naturally, anything or most things that we throw away end up in healthcare risk waste, as you can imagine, and that also cost money to destroy. So it's the one arm is the financial commercial component. The other arm is, of course, is the sustainability component. We'll be looking at alternative therapies, trying to think outside the box, and whether that treatment is appropriate to even begin with. So I think what we will be promoting more than ever is also out of the box thinking, not only internally as us as a company, staff looking at different modalities and commodities, but also from our vendors. Equipment and capex investments has to be supported by a thorough business case. This comes from the right down, from the top down, and the hospital managers would therefore have to prove, why they need certain pieces of equipment specifically, and what's the return on investment around it, or the business case. And that's going to be thorough. You'll see the hospital managers, clinical engineers, etc., asking for a lot of detailed information around this and to substantiate their business offering. So please think about that when you also do your submissions to them. From a vendor management, I think three C's for us is really around ongoing compliance and governance. We have no tolerance on that. We have to meet that and make sure that we maintain our compliance on various aspects. The consistent quality of the products and the services that we provide, and then the continuous supply is the important thing. And I think we have spent some time on that as well. The grading system I've kind of spoken about that we will be adopting in this coming year around various parameters or KPIs that we will be measuring vendors against. So in all, I think it's going to be a busy year. We have a lot going on, and I'm sure you've seen in the news when it comes to radiology, oncology, our intentions are quite clear there, renal especially as well. And how do we make everything we do efficient, even more efficient than what it is, while also keeping control of absolute good quality, but also the pricing at the same time. I think in a nutshell, that's more or less what I wanted to cover. Happy to take any questions, Nomti, if we have time.
Thanks, Hendrik, for an informative session. I think what you've just shared with us, it's things that we know, like as you say, it's the small things that make it easier. And we just need to refresh ourselves, share with our colleagues so that we have streamlined processes that minimize the back and forth, and we do the key things that we need for the business. So I have seen quite a few hands. Tanya, I see your hand is up. Nomti, can you please unmute so that Tanya can pose a question?
Mics are unmuted.
Hi, Hendrik. So I'm Tanya, the Executive Officer of SAMED, and just thank you so much. I really appreciate It's always very valuable for, I think, our members, although some of these documents or processes might be on your website or, made available. It's always really nice to hear it from someone and to explain it. So that's very valuable. I just have one or two comments, if I may. You mentioned transformation is also kind of an indicator or, an area that you're all starting to focus on. And it's really something that is very, very important to SAMED. We have a diversity in medtech dedicated committee. We have just launched a women empowerment index. We are coming to speak to, I think it's Mohammed in the next while to explain what that is. But also SAMED has partnered with, yes, the Youth Employment Services. So what I'm asking of you, and maybe this is going to be a bit controversial for our members, but we are trying as best to get our members to participate in that Women Empowerment Index. It is voluntary, as well as to partner with the YES initiative, because that ensures that our members are transforming. So what I'm asking of you is, when you engage with suppliers, could you start asking the question, are you partnering with YES if it's relevant to your company? Because it might not be relevant to all member companies, but also, what is your SAMED Women Empowerment Index score? Because our members can actually print out a certificate which gives them a score, and we're tracking metrics that matter in terms of empowering women. So that I would be very grateful for. And then also to remember that our members have to abide by a code of ethical marketing and business practice. And if you are welcome, if you know of any of our members that might be transgressing the code or acting unethically, we have a hotline. Please let us know, because it's also a very important aspect of SAMED and what we do and what we stand for. I think it would be great as well. I was just thinking that maybe, SAMED, some of our executive team should probably have an annual meeting with Life, just to share with you what are our strategic objectives as a trade association, and also if there are any, pending regulatory updates, etc. For example, around 18A and B, we know that, where there is still an exemption in place for medical devices and IVDs. But, just to share, I think, some of our broader positions on key matters that might also impact Life. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to our meeting with Mohammed, which will happen in due course.
Sure. Thanks.
Thanks, Tanya. You had to shoot your shot there. Duncan, I see your hand is up as well. I think you can unmute your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Duncan.
Awesome. Hi, morning, Hendrik. Morning, everybody. Great to speak to you again, Hendrik. Hendrik, just one question. Great slides. I think, all the aspects we kind of very familiar with in terms of the compliance around the procurement process and interaction and the various systems and tools we have to kind of be aligned with and adhere to. And I think that all kind of is something that we're all striving towards. I think, one thing that is important from an industry perspective is that we've seen it also in our engagements now when we look at the government sector, especially around NHI, around the sustainability of healthcare, right? One of the aspects that always comes up is value-based procurement, right? So really patient outcome-based procurement. And I think, as a country, is both in the public and in the private space, we're not moving fast enough in terms of value-based procurement. So really linking and partnering with organizations to actually prove that, a solution, and when I talk about a solution, I'm talking about a number of products used in combination that have a specific outcome or intended outcome, and then really partnering with, from a risk perspective, with organizations to say, hey, if you're not able to meet those patient outcomes, whether it be a reduction in some health-associated infections, as an example, that you would then suddenly get a penalty, right? Or you'd pay a higher price, or access would be restricted. So I think the point that I'm trying to make is that I think we're doing great stuff. I think when you guys look at quality and organizational strengths in terms of supporting a formulary listing, great stuff being done there. But I think there's still that movement that needs to happen towards value-based procurement.
Yeah, absolutely right, Duncan. You're quite right with that. And I think, we have the support as an organization to do that now from the different internal forums that we've got. I think the two important things around that. Value-based is a relative term to different people. So if we have statistics, data supporting that, one, that is real data, that's important. The second thing is, and I think I've mentioned this before, is we do have to get the basics right first. If we have the basics right, then we can get into these slightly more complex conversations. And yes, a risk-based approach is actually quite well, because that's what we do with the funders, right? We have risk-sharing models. So kind of that goes, if we get this right, this happens. If we don't get it right, this is what happens. And there's sharing in that. So open to those kind of conversations, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hendrik. I see a hand from BT Health. Sorry, I can't make out the name.
Good morning. It's Mark Brand.
Mark.
Mark, it's been a long time. How are you, Mark?
Hendrik, great to see you. It has been. Hendrik, great. Thank you for that presentation. I still remain in the consulting space in the industry. And my question has to do, and I'm very pleased to hear you refer to this in your assessment processes internally, specifically to do with equipment. My question was that for new and innovative technologies, does Life Healthcare have an appetite for participating in patient access programs, for example, with other stakeholders, funders, medical practitioners, academics, and so on, that allows installation and utilization of medtech in the interest of generating clinical and economic data to address areas of uncertainty? Examples of this, and I think you have been involved in this historically, examples of this would be typically in the robotic field, as well as things like TAVI, etc. But I mean, I think those were probably more the exception than the rule. But what is your outlook in this regard?
Yeah, so we have participated in the past. Important that goes through a clinical panel, because we're speaking about ethical clearance and all of these things that is required if we're going to do something of that sort. We have done it. We continue to do it. But what I'm saying is that the process doesn't really start through a procurement. We've got a role to play, but there is the larger clinical space that needs to be consulted. So we'll have to have that conversation if there's an opportunity like that on the table.
Thank you, Hendrik. It's exactly the advice I give to clients in terms of as they're developing their information dossiers that are to be presented to the funders who ultimately need to reimburse. In my opinion and my recommendation is that they do exactly the same with the hospital groups, even if it's way before launch. And it's really to give you insight with respect to the pipeline of technologies that are coming through the system.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. I see there's quite an appetite, but for the purposes of time, Hendrik, can I just pose this one question from Reynard? And then whatever else is left in the chat, we will share with you through Nomti, and you can just finish us with the response. Our next speaker is quite ready. The question from Reynard is, will Life Healthcare accept funder approvals other than Discovery?
Yes, and we have in the past as well. So granted, they are our biggest funder within our space. And so, and I'm sure most of you guys as well, the biggest player in South Africa, that's not a secret. But we have always considered MedScheme, whatever else, as part of that process. I think for us, the bigger risk is just that if there's a Discovery patient, we need to understand, though, we've got approval from, let's say, GEMS, is that do we have a risk of that product potentially not being reimbursed with that patient? Because what we don't want to do, we obviously don't want to sit with the bill, but we also don't want to go to the patient to say, oh, well, your medical aid didn't pay for this. That's our biggest thing. So if there's a kind of a inclination that goes, yep, Discovery has said that they in principle okay with it, but we're just waiting final approval, but I've got GEMS or MedScheme or whatever else approval, yes, we do accept those. That's always been. That's why you'll see we don't ask for Discovery approval, we ask funder approval.
Thanks so much, Hendrik, for your time. The questions that are in the chat, Nomti, I think we'll manage them outside of this session, and we will share with the posers of the questions. Thanks so much, Hendrik. I don't know if you'll be staying on, but our next speaker is okay. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so much. So in our next session, we'll be looking at medtech procurement and HTA updates in the NHI landscape. So we've got Fundile, who will be leading the presentation for us. And again, questions can be posted on the chat box. Just to give some background into Fundile, Fundile is a director for medical devices and health technology procurement management, and works within the NHI branch at the National Department of Health, and responsible for sector-wide procurement, strategic and policy direction, system transformation, and solution implementation. Fundile holds a degree in clinical engineering, complemented by an honors in healthcare technology management from UCT. He also holds an MBA in healthcare leadership from Stellenbosch University Business School, and is currently pursuing a Master of Science in Systems Engineering at Wits University, and has a keen interest in healthcare systems engineering. I'd like to welcome you, Fundile, to the session that will give us a lot of insight. You've got two keywords there, HTA and NHI, which are always quite a good conversation striker amongst the healthcare system, because we are all wanting to know what is the progress and how do we move from here. So the floor is yours, and thank you.
Let me check in with Fundile quickly.
Okay, thanks, Nomti.
All right, he said he's just having technical issues. He's frozen, but he is just restarting and he'll be with us shortly.
Okay, no problem. Thanks, Nomti.
Fundile is back with us. Hi, Fundile, can you confirm that you are able to go?
I see he's on mute. Oh, okay. I think. Fundile, can you hear us? Nomti, I see he's unmuted, but I don't see anything. I don't know. Will he be flatting his own slides?
Yes, he'll be flighting his own slides. Just give me a moment. I'm on the line with him.
Okay.
This is the moment where we need someone to tell a joke. Fundi, any jokes you know of?
I should have had something up my sleeve, Tanya. Oh gosh.
Yeah, I wish I could think of one quickly.
Yeah. But I think the computers, the internet, and everything else, it's thinking now, it's that time of the year. We can't give you anything extra. You've overutilized this in the year. So I think.
Yeah, and if it's any consolation to Fundile, I had a similar problem this morning. So I had to jump on a call.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yay, we got you back.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, let me share my screen. I hope this is going to work.
We're also hoping the site Fundile.
Let me know when you can see my screen, please.
There's nothing at the moment. We'll confirm once it's loaded.
Okay.
Okay, it's loading. Nothing at the moment. We still have a loading screen.
Let me try again.
There we go. We're good to go.
Okay, can you see my slide now?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, so yeah, so I'm sorry for the bad start. Bad start. It's not the best. Yeah. My name is Fundile, as per the introduction, and I'm a director for medical devices and health technology procurement management in the NHI branch. So my role basically is to develop procurement, right? And for the sake of time, I'll just get on with it, and let me know if my slides are moving.
Not at the moment. We're still on the first slide.
Okay, something is not right. So, all right. So, okay, can you see the second slide now?
Yes, we can. Golden approach.
Okay. Okay, so I will use my mouse because it seems like my laptop has got glitches. So, so the NHI's purpose, literally, it's to achieve sustainable and affordable universal health access, and this is a progressive goal. It's not static, yeah. And the focus is mainly on personal healthcare services, and the quality of it. So we know for a fact that in our country we've got a two-tiered system at the moment, private and public. And the approach is basically to create the fund and then pool the funds for universality and also risk sharing, and they call it social solidarity in the Act. And then of course what we want to see is that there is portability and continuity of health services throughout the Republic. And then the fund in itself is basically competing, it's free from the competition law because it wants to serve as a single purchaser and a single payer of healthcare services. And literally what you have to look at is that, currently the financing mechanisms in the country are, we heard from the previous speaker about medical aids being the dominant funders. Yeah. So in future, most likely what we're going to see is the NHI being the main funder in the state. And also we've got users on the one side and we've got healthcare providers. And the fund is not building hospitals, for instance, is not, providing infrastructure or funding the development or scaling of facilities within the country. That's a function of providers and a function of business, right? Even NGOs. But I think more so the goal is to look after the interest of users and the rights of users, that they're entitled to receive the quality of healthcare that is necessary, free at point of care. Yeah. And the fund must protect the rights of users. Yeah. Moving on, the rights of users is that they need to be able to travel anywhere in the country. As I said, portability is important. And then I think linked to reimbursement is that the fund will not pay for treatment if there is no necessity for it. And the health service in question, but also the cost-effective intervention, if it exists, it will pay, but if there's no cost-effective intervention, it won't pay, and it will be determined by the HTA work. And that's the work that we are currently working on and trying to build the HTA framework and the strategy, but also key to that is that we must develop a formulary of medicines and devices. Yeah. And then just the roadmap, what we're busy with right now is to work on the essential equipment list. I will touch more about the essential equipment list going forward and what it means. And the priority is primary health care. If you read section 57 of the Act, you will realize that phase 1 is a transitional arrangement to implement CAPS. CAPS are contracting units for primary health care. So we want to use the essential equipment list in the development of the CAPS proof of concept. And then what is going to happen with the CAPS work is that we are going to scale it up. For instance, at the moment, it's about 9 sites in the 50, in the 9 provinces. We've chosen nine sites in 9 of the 52 districts, health districts in the country. And what we're doing there is working from a bottoms-up approach of building on the CAPS initiative. So the work of defining the essential equipment list is basically started. So we are closing on the technical committee to establish the technical committee. And this is currently internal work. It does not involve external stakeholders. So we are consulting with other government departments, the Western Cape, Eastern Cape, Gauteng, and we're establishing representation from those provinces. And then moving on, in 2025, 2026, we want to basically fine-tune or basically to build a quality management process on continuous improvement of the essential equipment list, and basically we want to make sure that it is as 98% or 90% as accurate by the time we get to to the version that is going to be adopted for procurement. And then determining the essential equipment list is in phases. So the current phase that we're working on is basically an identification process, and we're looking at the purpose of use and the configuration, including contracting aspects of existing devices that are being used in the system. We've got tenders, for instance, we've got National Treasury tenders, we've got provincial tenders that are run in parallel. So we're analyzing those tenders and looking at the products, what is in the, the quality, and also who's supplying it. And we are not much concerned about the cost at the moment. It is a scoping exercise. And for instance, key to this is that it's building this based on the standard treatment guidelines. So for instance, primary healthcare in private sector is sketchy in terms of what basically when you go to private sector and you go primary healthcare, you've got a GP and you probably go to dentistry. But we've got a nice policy in South Africa on the standard treatment guidelines for primary healthcare, covering all the health conditions. So the goal is to develop the list using that as a base, right? Then phase 2 of that will involve a more evaluative kind of work, and I must mention that this evaluative work is not full HTA, yeah. So it's basically device evaluations that are rapid, yeah. And we want to establish that framework because in the country there is a need for that. We don't have currently a process of device evaluations. I mean. And we don't even have a database. So phase 2 literally will look at the evidence and appraising the best available evidence. And we want to also start looking at the measures of effectiveness and measures of performance and separately, because we believe that the measures of effectiveness are tied directly to user requirements, and which is the patient. And when I always refer to the user, please bear with me. It's the patient in this case. In the Act, we refer to the patient as a user, and that's the term going forward that I might use more often. So when I mean user, I mean a patient. And then also we'll start then looking deep into the supplier price aspects of it and matching the scoped items versus what is available in the market. And then other health system strengthening work that we're doing, for instance, at the moment, we're also speaking to National Treasury about strategic procurement and SCM, and how we work with the existing laws. Yeah, the PFMA currently has regulated a linear process. So if we're now introducing a procurement process around the essential equipment list that is involving HTA work and procurement together. So we need to find a way of how we can procure devices more faster and on time, and also look at basically a rapid approach that is more agile. Currently, I think it's more rigid, and I think we've experienced, if you've dealt with government and sold products to government or supplied products to government, you go through a tendering process which has got a long lead time, right? So those are the things that we're looking at when we're exploring the strategic purchasing and payment mechanisms with National Treasury. So in a nutshell, also there's an interrelationship that we're trying to manage between HTA and the formulary itself, and also healthcare benefits, and also the delivery of healthcare services. What we are working on is basically the stage of establishing the formulary, and the formulary is more advanced when it comes to the aspect of devices. There is an EML that the department has been working on for probably 12 or 15 years, and they're doing a great job. They've got a team, a core team, and core committee members that are are building on that. We don't have that on the devices side. So the goal is to develop a similar process and learn from the mistakes and the successes that they've achieved so far, and do rapid HTA for devices. This is, again, I'll reiterate that it's different from a full HTA or comprehensive HTA on interventions. There will be room for that, and that work will be done by the Health Technology Assessment Agency. Right? And then just on the essential equipment list itself, it's been in a conversation in the country for some time, and it's been part of discussion. So Section 90, for instance, of the National Health Act calls for it that the minister may make regulations in consultation with the National Health Council. In government, for instance, all regulations must be consulted with the National Health Council, which includes the provinces, and also health technology. That's where it ends, right? And then we saw that in the 2018-2024 Presidential Health Compact, there was a call for it again, and a call for HTA. And then there's a new Presidential Health Compact that recently got signed, 2024-2029, and it still pursues the essential equipment list. And we are leading the process of developing that, and it must be at least available by June 2025. And then the other aspect is that that drives change is that, you've got the health inquiry report, for instance, that what was produced by the Competition Commission, and that points out that cost effectiveness of technologies is not well managed, and also it's not well developed in South Africa, including matching cost and benefit and outcomes benefit. So and currently also we've got devices that are out there that are being bought or used without evidence, and the selection is I can go on and on about the reasons why they are selected. And in some cases, they enter the country and they promise a lot of value, but they don't deliver that return that is expected. And also, we've got quite a huge market in South Africa that depends on imports, so we have to consider that. And then also, if we look at procurement in South Africa, it is not well developed. So for instance, you'll find that we've got this journey that we must pursue in the NHI to create value, but we are still stuck in compliance with the law, the PFMA. And that's the work that currently takes place in the provinces, is just to procure according to the PFMA. So we have not started pursuing efficiencies and increasing accountability, and even creating value for the Department of Health, as an organization. But in the NHI, we want to create value for citizens and society. That is a gap. There's a gap in between that we need to fill, and there's also tension. And I think at some point we need to get to a point where we can collaborate on value creation, and the procurement system allows for that. Procurement in the NHI, for instance, how we're developing it, we're looking at centralizing and a centralized approach, but centralizing means facilitation and coordination. So we're not going to be placing orders, central orders, but we'll facilitate the contract. And then strategic purchasing is already a term that I think we should get used to. I know we want to talk about value-based procurement, but in our context, it's strategic purchasing. It is in the new Public Procurement Act also mentions that, and if we can adopt that approach of strategic purchasing within the fund for services and for devices, I think we could incorporate value-based procurement into that. But also there's a section, for instance, section 10 on the powers of the fund, that the payment of healthcare service providers will be it will be based on quality and value. So at every level of care. So the pursuit for value is explicit in the Act itself. Right? And then just at the end scale of procurement, we're looking at driving sufficient quality and quantity in our work that we're doing, and also an affordable price. And there are sections that, or clauses in the act that pursue that, and also supply guarantees, and also direct delivery is a priority, and also collecting utilization data. So what we are setting up at the moment needs to achieve this, including the documentation that we're developing, whether it's contracts or it is a framework. It aims to achieve these deliverables. And then as I close, I just want to highlight that again, that in section 57, you will find all the things that you are allowed to do at this moment in this transitional phase, right? And one of those activities or initiatives is to set up the Health Technology Assessment Agency, which will be a ministerial advisory committee, right? So, section 57, subsection 3 is talking about using the best available evidence to measure cost effectiveness, allocative effectiveness, and productive efficiencies, and also technical efficiencies. So even though those are probably at the end when you've got data, I think we can start preparing for that. Yeah? And the implications that we have is that we need to look at evaluating whether a technology provides a value relative to the next one, or next available one, or existing health technology. And also when we're looking at allocative efficiencies, we must look at doing the right thing in terms of allocating the products. And I always associate this allocative aspect of efficiency to consumables, and because they are tied to individuals and patients, and also to the concept of personal health care. So I think it will play a huge role in the future, the allocative approach in HTA. And also productive efficiency brings in the cost into this optimal mix of inputs. The inputs here will be the devices and products. But also technical efficiency is focused more on the how part, yeah, and excluding the cost. And in many cases, you will find that you will have to go with the product that provides technical efficiency, and it's costly, right? And you have to just appreciate that it is costly, and maybe because it doesn't have the next competition within the market, and it's new, and maybe the benefits outweigh the cost, right? And then in closing, just things to think about is that value in healthcare is to an important extent dependent on the beholder, yeah, in the context. And then also what we must also realize is that strategic procurement, as we call it within the Act itself, and also within the Public Procurement Act, it is carrying elements of value-based procurement, right? And then also what we want to also probably, the message is that, defining value-based procurement against health outcomes or the user at the core is what we should all rally behind. I think other secondary aspects of value, which are either very close or too far from the patient, either they are equipping, or they are resourcing a space, or they are driving profit, or they are reducing waste. Yeah, and it can be in theater, it can be using a device, for instance, because you want to reduce the level of effort. Sorry about that. And that is a question of a perspective of value, because someone holds that position or that context, right? And then the evidence-based value demonstration is still lacking in medtech, and I think we need to build more evidence. Yeah, I heard the previous speakers and the questions that were asked about collecting data and using the data to justify the best available performance, or performance of the device and the benefits that it produces. We have not got there yet. It's work. And then also we need to create this initiative of supporting evidence-based business cases and this holistic view of solutions and technologies offered. And I think what I do want to say is that the shift from primary focus on products there's a product dominant logic and also a logic of, to say, I want to increase sales. Yes, it is working now, but in the future, it might not work very well in a space where there will be scrutiny on the product, right? And there's just so much to lose in terms of quality and value to take chances on products that don't produce that expected outcome, right? And also, I think we must be consciously aware that we are transforming a complex system. It is open and adaptive, and every time it is continuously reinforcing itself, elements of itself, including the culture, is reinforcing either positively or negatively, and that is what is happening. So the policies that we're looking at are also going to be embedded in consultations and stakeholder engagement to understand the cultural aspect and the behavior of current practices. So, for instance, we're currently working on a marketing code of conduct, and we've got approval to develop the basically the policy, right? And the next step for it is consultation. So we want to really practice that engagement and get to understand where are the pain points and who's going to lose or who's at risk of losing or gaining when we introduce such a policy, right? And then also we must also just recognize that the devices as individuals are not as impactful as the sum of devices, right? And the performance of the sum we need to look at. And I know that in some countries, for instance, suppliers and manufacturers collaborate and bring products together to tackle a disease and the good example is cancer treatment, right? And you'll find that suppliers and manufacturers are leveraging the expertise that's close by and integrating. And I think we need more of that going forward. Yeah, thank you. That's all from me. It was an update, and I hope I was short enough.
Thanks, Fundile. I'm sure we have taken into account a lot that has been said. I'm sure there's lots of questions, but we are indeed pressed for time. So I would request our colleagues to drop the questions on the chat so that we can engage with you. Probably we will need to just have a forum just for HTA and NHI update when you are available to engage with the stakeholders. But as you rightfully said in your parting shot, it is a complex, it involves lives, it's quite an adaptive process, it is a fluid process. And we hope at some point there will be an opportunity to engage us as stakeholders, but also importantly, just to understand that we know things happen at head office or at national level, and the cascade into the provinces, whether it is something that we will see so that there's uniformity in the voice and thought process that we hear out there. But thank you so much for your time. Nomti will reach out to you with the questions that we would have received from this session. Thank you for availing yourself.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Please excuse me. Yeah, I'm
you
going to drop off.
You are excused. Thanks, Mundil. Thanks, colleagues. We are indeed pressed for time. We will move to our next speaker, Dr. Pakeng. He will just give insights into Insight Actuaries Independent Review, which will look at advancing HTA and value-based initiatives. Dr. Tebogo started his early career as a medical practitioner in South Africa and in the UK. He possesses a wealth of strategic and technical healthcare experience from the 23 years he has spent in various clinical, executive, and fiduciary leadership roles within the health sector. Tebogo has served as an independent consultant and senior advisor to medical schemes, local and multinational organizations, government agencies, industry representative bodies, and as a member of the Global Health Strategy Officers Community at the World Economic Forum. Thank you, Dr. Pakeng, for joining us, and over to you.
Shelley and Dr. Tebogo, you can go ahead.
Hello, can you hear us now?
We can hear you, however, there's an echo. You may go ahead, Shelley. Wendy, please give me a moment. Let me just get hold of her and I'll come back to you now.
All right, Samti, thanks.
We can see the slides. Would you put it on presentation mode for us? And there's still an echo.
Project from
Much better. Thank you.
Thanks, Samti.
why can't we see it? Okay, 1 second. Because if you're presenting,
We're audible.
Mhm.
I think.
Yes,
Are
you
we
are.
audible?
You are
Yes.
audible
Yes.
and we
Through
can
the
see the
laptop.
presentation as well.
I'll get back to that thing. Good morning. Just checking if we are firstly audible and whether you can see the presentation on the screen.
All good, Dr. Paleng on our side. We can continue.
All right. Apologies. We just had a minor technical glitch. Apologies for that. So, and you won't be able, we don't have video at the moment, so you won't be able to see us. So I'm here with Shelley Ann McGee, our lead health economist. I'm Tebogo Paleng. I'm the head of Insight Health Solutions, otherwise known as the Clinical and Strategic Governance Unit within Insight. We'll just take you through, so that the presentation is firstly just an overview of what Insight does nowadays, and specifically the clinical team. And then Shelley will walk you through our thinking and approach to health technology assessment. We've just recently, I think about 4 or 5 months ago, set up a health economics unit within Insight, and we'll share some of our thinking experiences, etc., in over the course of this presentation. So if we get going, I think most of you would know Insight as the Insight Actuaries and Consultants. It's been a 22-year journey. Actually started off as the Health Monitor company in 2002. Then we had Barry Childs running Lighthouse Actuarial Consultancy, which focused mainly on the supply side, hospitals, medical device providers, etc. And that company then they created CareGauge, which was a special purpose vehicles where all the new IP was housed, the DRG group, etc. Then there was the merger and the birth of Insight as we know it today, the brand Insight in 2014. So Insight is 10 years old, but actually has been trading in the environment for a longer while, since 2002. And since then, we've had, especially over the last 6 years or so, we've got an entity in Australia focused on actuarial services. They don't quite do traditional actuarial services as we have it, pricing, IBNR, etc. They focus much more on healthcare quality, measurement frameworks, etc. So that's in Australia. It's a small team. It's about six or seven people. Then we have a life actuaries company called Life Solutions that was formed in 2020. Advisory, which is more financial advisory, looking at the brokerage sort of space. And then Health Solutions, our unit, which was formed 2 years ago. We're actually 2 years and a month this month. So today, this is what Insight looks like. We've got Insight Actuarial Solutions in South Africa. So I'm going left to right. Health Solutions, which is my unit, the unit Shelley and I serve in. Life Solutions Advisory, Insight Data Solutions, where we house industry level data. We manage about 60 at a claim line level, so granular level, about just under 2/3 of the private sector's transactional data, so medical aid claims data, about 2/3 of that. We also perform peer review actuarial services for Discovery Health medical scheme. So at an aggregate level, we see pretty much about 85% or more of the industry in our data universe. Then we've got Insight Actuaries Australia, which is the last one on the right. We are a diverse team. This is not all of us. It's so in the group, I think we're 105 people nowadays. The clinical team is 14 people now. We started with 0 2 years ago, so we're growing quite quickly. And all indications are that we might someday, maybe over the next 5 years or so, grow to the size or even bigger than the actuarial team, which is the South African actuarial team on the health side is about 40 people, 40 actuaries. We are the second largest employer of health actuaries after Discovery Health. But the team is quite diverse, as you can see, and we are proudly a level 1 BEE contributor, and we have a 50-50 split when it comes to gender amongst all our consultants across the business. On the actuarial side, in total, so, on the South African end, it's about two-thirds of the market in terms of data. But when you combine the other territories where we operate, Australia, some of the African countries, we operate in about 30 countries across the globe, plus Europe. We've recently secured some assignments in Thailand and Saudi Arabia in the past 3 weeks. So we're in a conversation in a week's time with the Republic of Ireland. So we do keep busy. And if you look outside of SA plus the external environment, we manage about just under 10 million lives in our data universe. And then we run this platform called Voice of the Patient, which is patient-reported experience and outcomes. And we run about 5,000 surveys a month there. Our clients give us monthly pre-authorization data, so we see what's happening with those clients, and we run PREMS and PROM studies and issue reports to our clients. We have a few medical scheme clients and a couple of hospital groups that use the platform. And I've already mentioned that we're a team of about 100. On the health side, that's our mantra. So we operate across the industry, but the main thing is really everything we do in our unit and with the health actuaries we work with is guided by this simple statement that we believe everyone deserves access to high quality, affordable, person-centered healthcare. And we try and stay true to this in all our engagements. So specifically now around Insight Health Solutions. So this is now the clinical team. This is what the services we provide in our areas of focus at the moment. Strategy and corporate governance consulting in the health space specifically. We also provide a lot of compliance and clinical governance consulting in that portfolio as well. It's just the health space in South Africa is a very complex from a regulatory perspective. So we often get clients who just want clarity, and sometimes they have fallen foul of regulations, and sometimes they want to innovate but don't want to fall foul of the regulations, etc. So we provide that sort of advice there. It's usually at CEO and board level. Then we have the health policy and health economics portfolio, which is led by Shelley. We have our colleague Yanga. I'm not sure if Yanga has been able to get on the call. So we have in there two health economists, Shelley and Yanga. We have our medical advisory team provides the technical medical advisory support and clinical review support there. 2 actuaries and 3 clinical researchers. So it's a team of about 7 people that services all our clients. We get clients from the medical devices space, pharma, medical schemes, and we're engaging one of the South African hospital groups actually on work they're doing out of country, actually in the Middle East, rather than what they're focusing on in SA. So that's health policy and economics. And Shelley is going to spend the rest of the time after I speak talking about that. Then medical advisory and clinical risk management. We have two medical advisors. We have about 5 doctors in the team. But this area here is looked after by 2 of our senior doctors, and they provide medical advisory services. We have one pharmaceutical company that's asked, they didn't have a strong medical affairs department, and they've asked us to provide technical support there. So we do that kind of work as well, not just for medical schemes. Then we have the clinical innovation portfolio. The main agenda here is to produce products from the health team. So the bulk of what we do at the moment, we're still the babies in the Insight group, and the bulk of what we do is consulting, but we have a long pipeline of products that we're busy working on and building. One of which is the HTA library, which Shelley will talk about. So the technical work is provided by the health policy and economics block that you see on the top right, and the clinical innovation team looks after shaping the HTA platform and the library that we're building as a product and an offering to the environment. And we have care navigation, which focuses on consulting work, supporting the healthcare provider and landscape. There, our focus is patient registries, care pathway design, clinical guidelines support, etc., and all the issues that the health professionals and health providers face on a day-to-day basis. We have a team of clinical coders, so clinical coding and billing intelligence. We have 3 internationally certified coders in our team with a wealth of experience. I think amongst the 3, probably about 30, 40 years of industry experience. and we have the scientific research advisory team. So across all of this is a team of 14 people, with some of the actuaries supporting, and overall experience about 150 years of healthcare industry experience within the team. And then outside of consulting services, we have some of you may have interacted with some of these tools. There's the analytics and the clinical advisory, and then we've got clinical tools, and there's a number of them. I'm not going to go through the detail here, but it's stuff like, we've got fraud analytics tool, we've got the signal model, which looks at value for money for various schemes. Usually it's medical schemes who are asking for this because they have to constantly look at, how they price their benefits versus the actual benefit, the cost of their health plans versus the benefits that you can access through them. We've got a diagnosis-related grouper, DRG system. There's only 2 independent DRG systems in the country. The one is owned by Discovery, the second one is Insights. Ours is open source. And it's the DRG grouper that's used by most of the market. I think probably about 2/3 of the South African private sector uses our grouper, and the other is used by the Discovery stable. We're in discussions with the Department of Health, and we hope, as part of building the DRG system for the NHI, that we currently provide advice, but we hope that that this will also be a national kind of asset in time. Then we have voice of the patient, which I covered earlier, a whole lot of managed care analytics that we provide, clinical episode grouper, which looks at patients and groups of patients longitudinally. So instead of looking at a patient at a claim line level, it's actually able to say, well, if this patient has, diabetes and hypertension and has a fractured ankle, and it will look at those care episodes longitudinally, look at your interaction with the health system, look at historical costs, present costs, and it's able to predict patient costs within a 12-month time horizon. So you're able to look at a group of patients or a single patient and estimate based on on their clinical makeup and their demographics, etc., what their costs are likely to be 12 months into the future. Geomapping tools.
Apologies, Dr. Paleng. We are very much pressed for time. I'm sorry to interject, but I would like to say, in your presentation, maybe you can touch on the key pointers that you will really want to end this call with. We have less than 4 minutes. We have really ran over. We have had technical glitches with one of our speakers. So please do use the key points that you want to drive across. If there's any contact details that you would want to leave, please share them with us as well. I do sincerely apologize.
We thought we would still get our full allocation of time.
Unfortunately, we have a hard stop at 12. So yeah, unfortunately, we had technical glitches this morning. I do apologize for that.
Oh, all right, we went away. So we have a whole stack, probably another 10 slides on HTA. So we thought we had the full allocation of time. So unfortunately, then we're not going to get to that.
Well, maybe you can touch on the key points. We will arrange another session where we can probably iron out or give you much more of a time slot. Let's use this as an introductory session. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. I'd rather we just set aside a separate session then. I think that would work better.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't do it in 4 minutes. It's a whole discussion on HTA. So we thought we had the original, what was it, 40 half an hour. Yeah, so I think maybe let me just end off with I've given you an overview of what we do as Insight and on the clinical side. And then on, the next slide, in fact, after this slide, we get into the HTA conversation, and maybe we can do that another time.
Thank you so much for understanding. I'm just getting some messages. Hold 1 second. My other moderator who's on the background is requesting that you maybe continue. Let's continue, and we will just maybe have to reschedule our last speaker because there's a bit of an overrun on time. So you can continue, Dr. Paleng.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, it's fine. So I'll just wrap up this slide, and then I'll leave you with
You can move to HTA. I think
with Shelley to cover HTA. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Okay then. So over to you, Shelley. Thank you.
Thank you, TP. All right. So thanks, everyone. I realize now we are very pressed for time, so I'll do my best to go quickly. Essentially, what we've recognized, I guess, in the space of health technology assessment is that there is potential room for centralization. What we feel is the medical schemes decentralization and sort of the competition issues and the competition between the medical schemes and the managed care organizations has sort of led to fragmentation of decision-making processes as well as health technology assessment processes. So all the schemes have their own methods, etc., which makes for a very sort of duplicative system. We've got the stated policy intent to build HTA capacity in South Africa. We know we have very limited resources dedicated to HTA. We know there is a limited skills capacity in the HTA for South Africa. So, just have everything split up and done in different places becomes quite challenging. And yeah, there isn't really a formally designated HTA institution or assets in South Africa. And no formally really agreed framework. So we started on the premise of a more centralized approach would be a better sort of to serve decision makers in the private sector. And I won't be able to go through this in great detail, but what we've looked at a couple of sort of industry models that could work, including an industry forum, sort of just a pure consultancy model, and an institution that could be set up to deal with the HTA, and eventually settled on what we're calling an independent exchange, which would, I guess, allow a functionality where all of the components can come together to form an HTA offering. Our HTA process at the moment is nothing that I think most of you in HTA and market access wouldn't have seen before. We start with and this is sort of, while we're proposing doing this for the sake of the medical schemes environment, we do have to pick our topics quite carefully at the moment. The team is still quite small. And then we go through your typical sort of HTA process: literature review, clinical effectiveness, economic evaluation, evidence synthesis, consider all the ethical, legal, and social considerations for the scheme. There is an element of stakeholder engagement which should actually go in the middle there, because we start very early with the stakeholder engagement processes. We make our final recommendations, and that obviously needs to go into a monitoring and reassessment process as well. And that can happen at any time during the product development, so pre-market, during regulatory phases, to inform a reimbursement decision, and then, of course, reevaluation for reimbursement. I'm going to skip the principles there. And the proposed client offering really is going to be in the form of a platform, which will take the form of a client HTA library. We are, in the midst of doing a couple of full health technology assessments now, and I've suggested then that we also have the option of rapid reviews, as well as some early awareness for the schemes environment, sort of tracking some global trends. And then I think important from our side, because there are none of these tools really in the market, is basic health economics, which would involve costing tools, sort of easy calculators for quick review, as well as cost of illness estimates. I think with all the claims data we have at our disposal, things like a day in hospital costing for an epileptic episode would be, I think, something fairly useful to the industry, just to be able to populate economic queries and economic models. It will be available on a platform, and then of course we will still maintain sort of client-specific requests, and then also potentially use all of this to inform protocols and policies, for our client schemes. So yeah, the way forward, we need to sort of maintain an independent exchange with a deliberate set of governance processes and a sustainable funding model, obviously, which is why the platform will be subscription-based. And then, yeah, consultative processes for selection and prioritization of topics are going to be key elements as well. And I've already sort of discussed the client and user tools. This is the proposed governance framework. Insight will really only be sort of functioning as an entity here in the operations and health informatics space. Outside of that, there is a whole set of sort of governance structures, clinical integrity, ethics and regulatory affairs, data integrity and reporting, that will be, I guess, as much as we are as a consultancy, we will be consulting with external individuals on how best to achieve this, as well as sort of an overall governing body steering committee, if you will, sort of guiding this whole process. So thank you very much. Thank you for the additional time. I do appreciate it.
Thanks, Shirley, and thanks, Dr. Paleng. I would just like to check with the group if there are any questions. You can post them on the chat or raise your hand and Nomti will unmute you. Just on my side, Dr. Paleng or Shirley, can you just maybe share some contact details if anybody is an uptaker and wants to explore the process and the services that you offer? Maybe we can drop them in the chat, Nomti, or...
I will do so.
Okay.
Sure.
Thanks, Shirley.
The details in the chat, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. And maybe just as a follow-up question, looking at the landscape that is heading towards NHI, are you doing any puzzle fitting in terms of synergizing processes from a supplier perspective or from a healthcare institution? What is your take with the current landscape?
So of course, there's a couple of things happening at the moment. I mean, as Fundi just presented just before this, I saw. So at the moment, what we are trying to do is everything that we do, try and align it at least with the National Department of Health, Health Technology Assessment Guidelines. Of course, those were generated with medicines in particular in mind. So there's some elements there that will not fit sort of adequately with the medtech space in all likelihood. So as much as we are following their guidance, we are also seeking then potentially to, I guess, generate some guidance to inform the National Department of Health's HTA processes as we go forward. But yeah, at the moment, we are trying to make sure everything we do, at least methodologically, aligns with the way the National Department of Health is thinking in terms of their guidance that they've produced.
Are you dipsticking into the, I know different provinces have different view in terms of what it should look like, the final picture. Are you dipsticking into that, or NDOH is just a guideline or umbrella benchmarking?
No, so we haven't started work at individual province level yet.
Okay, okay. Thanks, Shirley. Any other takers? I don't think we have any questions at this point in time, but Shirley, we do have the contact details on the chat box. So if there's any further probing or information sharing sessions that our colleagues might wish to explore, I'm sure they will reach out. And we do apologize. We had some technical glitches with one of our speakers, which then obviously impacted on the time schedule. But we know you're out there, and if a need arises, we will reach out. Nomti, I don't know if there's anything from your side.
And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, so to everybody, we're giving you 10 minutes back of your time. I'm sure it's been an informative session, but thank you for joining us in this highly important forums that we hold, so that whatever information our stakeholders have, they do share it with us, and we work within the knowledge and understanding of the industry within which we work with. And Nomti and the team, thank you for always organizing and making us well-versed within the industry we are in. Thanks, everyone. Have a brilliant day moving forward.